So, picture this. You're standing on the shores of the Indian Ocean, early 15th century. You look out at the horizon, and instead of a couple of lonely fishing boats, you see, well, a sprawling, floating city coming right at you. Welcome to this explainer on a truly forgotten giant of the seas, a magnificent maritime presence that completely predates the European age of discovery. We're talking about the story of Admiral Zheng He's legendary treasure fleets. It's this awe-inspiring yet kind of frequently overlooked chapter in human history. And it isn't just a story about ships, right? It's a story about the staggering projection of wealth, power, and prestige by the Ming Dynasty. It basically challenges everything we think we know about early global exploration, painting a picture of an empire at the absolute peak of its naval engineering. So, let's explore exactly how they did it and why the whole shebang just vanished.
Okay, let's dive into this. When we think about the great era of global exploration, our brains usually jump straight to the European age of discovery. You know, Columbus, Magellan, Vasco da Gama. But that era was largely defined by a very specific type of expansion: colonization, conquest, and a timeline starting at the very tail end of the 1400s. Decades earlier, however, the Ming Dynasty was already completely dominating the Indian Ocean. And they weren't doing it with heavily armed warships looking to conquer new lands. No, they were doing it with magnificent floating palaces. These were awe-inspiring vessels designed not for war, but to project the absolute cultural and economic supremacy of China. It completely flips our traditional understanding on its head. We aren't looking at scrappy explorers braving the unknown. We're looking at a hyper-advanced superpower taking a massive victory lap around the known world.
400 feet. That is the estimated length of a Ming Dynasty baochuan, or treasure ship. I mean, to put that staggering number into perspective, think about Christopher Columbus's famous ship, the Santa Maria, which sailed nearly a century later. The Santa Maria was maybe 60, perhaps 70 feet long. You could practically fit Columbus's entire tiny caravel inside the cargo hold of just one of these colossal Chinese treasure ships. No way, right? But at 400 feet long, sporting up to 9 massive masts and these sweeping red silk sails, these ships were literally the architectural marvels of the ancient world. They featured watertight bulkheads, luxurious state cabins, sweeping decks. When a ship of this gargantuan size rolled into your harbor, you didn't just notice it, you were entirely humbled by it. It was a masterpiece of naval engineering, meant to inspire absolutely total awe.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer, unprecedented scale of this whole operation. The logistics are almost hard to even comprehend. In a highly focused window from 1405 to 1433, Admiral Zheng He commanded 7 separate, massive expeditions. We're talking about a fleet size of over 200 ships and a staggering crew of 27,000 men. This wasn't just an expedition, this was the relocation of a medium-sized city across the ocean. To keep an armada this large alive, they had highly specialized vessels. Actually, they built dedicated horse ships just to transport cavalry, massive water tankers to ensure fresh drinking water for tens of thousands of sailors, supply ships laden with grain, all sailing alongside those colossal treasure ships. It was a projection of power so immense and so incredibly well organized that it left absolutely every kingdom it touched in a state of utter shock.
And they weren't just hugging the coastline of China either. Zheng He's fleets navigated a vast, complex network all the way from Southeast Asia, across the expanse of the Indian Ocean, right to the coast of East Africa. We are talking about reaching places like modern-day Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and all the way over to Somalia and Kenya, and he managed to navigate this incredible logistical web with unparalleled precision. Just think about the advanced technology required to coordinate 200 ships over thousands of miles of open, unpredictable ocean. The Ming sailors were masterfully charting the stars, analyzing complex weather patterns, and utilizing highly advanced magnetic compasses. And this was decades before European explorers like Vasco da Gama would even begin to gingerly edge their way into these very same waters. They mapped the trade routes of the ancient world with a level of sophistication that was truly centuries ahead of its time. So the crucial point is understanding exactly why they were out there. And it all comes down to a diplomatic system known as tributary trade. This fundamentally separates Zheng He's voyages from the later European colonizers, and it's rooted deeply in the Chinese worldview of the time. The Ming Dynasty didn't want to conquer these distant lands, because, guided by their philosophy, they believed they were already the Middle Kingdom, the literal and cultural center of the world. They felt no need to extract resources by force. Instead, this was a system focused entirely on prestige. The strategy was brilliantly simple: show up with a fleet so massive and spectacular that local rulers would happily offer tribute and acknowledge the Chinese emperor's superiority. In exchange, these foreign kings were showered with the finest goods China had to offer. It was a masterclass in soft power. Domination through sheer, breathtaking display rather than the point of a sword.
Which leads us to these incredible exotic exchanges. Just picture the bustling, vibrant ports of Calicut in India or Mogadishu in Africa. You have foreign dignitaries walking up the massive wooden ramps of the treasure ships. The Ming fleets were offloading masterfully crafted Chinese porcelain, tons of luxurious silk, and advanced technologies. In return, well, they gathered pearls, exotic spices, and famously, living animals. They actually brought giraffes, zebras, and ostriches all the way back to the emperor's court in China. In fact, the first giraffe they brought back caused an absolute sensation. The court mistook it for a qilin, a mythical unicorn-like creature from Chinese folklore that supposedly only appeared during the reign of a truly great ruler. Imagine the sensory explosion of these encounters. It was a buzzing, vibrant exchange of the world's most precious goods and ideas, tying continents together.
But, history is rarely a straight line. We see a radical and, frankly, shocking shift in tone here. Right at the height of this unprecedented maritime supremacy, the whole thing comes to a sudden, screeching halt. The Chinese government underwent a jarring shift towards a strict isolationist policy. It's honestly one of the most abrupt geopolitical pivots in history. Just as quickly as this epic global presence began, a presence that could have easily allowed China to unconditionally dominate global maritime trade for centuries to come, the Ming Dynasty violently slammed the brakes. The fleets were grounded, the voyages were banned, and the era of the floating palaces was over almost as soon as it had truly begun.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how fast an empire's trajectory can turn on a dime when internal politics shift. It all started with the death of the Yongle Emperor, the great visionary patron of these voyages. His successors had a very different worldview. They viewed the massive fleets as a huge, unnecessary drain on the state's treasury, especially with new, aggressive threats emerging on China's northern land borders. So, almost overnight, China aggressively turned inward. They adopted this fierce isolationism, basically deciding the outside world had absolutely nothing of value to offer the Middle Kingdom. Then came the final, devastating blow: the deliberate destruction of the official navigational records and the outright burning and dismantling of the fleet itself. These magnificent 400-foot ships were literally left to rot in the harbor. One of the greatest monumental achievements in human engineering was intentionally erased from within by the very government that built it.
Which leaves us with a profound, lingering historical question. What if China had continued its maritime expansion? Think about it. If those 200 ships and 27,000 men had kept sailing, kept mapping, kept innovating, history as we know it is completely rewritten. Would European ships have even stood a chance in the Indian Ocean if the Ming fleet was still actively patrolling it? Would the discovery of the Americas have happened from the West, or would Chinese explorers have crossed the Pacific first? It is arguably one of history's most fascinating what-ifs. I highly encourage you to ponder this incredible alternate reality, and imagine how entirely different our global map and the balance of world power would look today if the great treasure fleets had never been ordered to burn.